It has been a difficult time to see our family's history be challenged publicly, and I recognize the ways in which I described my heritage have not always been as accurate as they could have been. As I have said before, for this, I sincerely apologize. To be clear, I have never claimed Indigenous status for myself.
Of Michael Barrett.
Mr. Boissonnault, I'll give you an opportunity to come clean with Canadians. Who's the other Randy?
Mr. Chair, could you have the member please clarify his question?
Well, it's a pretty straightforward question. In your previous appearance at other committees in this scandal, you said that it was an other Randy. Who is the other Randy at your former company, Global Health Imports?
Mr. Barrett, I am not involved in any of the conversations. If you are referring to reports in the media, I'm not involved in those conversations. And the Ethics Commissioner has indicated very clearly that I'm not involved in any of those conversations, any of those texts between Mr. Anderson and the person you just raised. And in fact, if you take a look at recent court cases, both the Gowie Group has indicated that they've never met me. I've never met them. And 4M Medical has indicated that they have never met me. I have never met them.
So the problem that we have is that you had previously said that you didn't have any contact with your business partner, Mr. Anderson, while you were serving in Justin Trudeau's cabinet. But then when you got caught, you admitted that you had, of course, sent text messages and that there was a phone call between you and your business partner exactly when he was corresponding with potential clients and fraud victims about Randy, and Randy being in Vancouver, and that's where you were. The problem that we have is that in committee appearances, you've lied about owning 50% of the business. You lied about being in communication.
Mr. Chair.
You lied about there being another Randy.
That is not a fair characterization, Mr. Chair.
You lied
Mr. Chair,
about being Indigenous, and you lied about being a journalist. How can we believe anything that you say today?
Mr. Barrett, just 1 second, please. We have a point of order. Mr. Fresh, I don't know who raised it. It was...
Go ahead, Peter. Okay.
All together.
Yeah.
Mr. Carr?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, can you provide us with your reflections, please, on whether or not you believe it's within order to refer to a member in committee as a liar?
How can we believe anything that you say when all of the things that I've listed that you said aren't true? When you said you were Indigenous, you said you were a journalist, you said you weren't in contact with your business partner, you said that the company wasn't getting any federal contracts. All of those things aren't true. You said one thing and the exact opposite is true. Now, your Liberal colleagues want to put flowery language around that. If you say something that's not true, we all know what that is. Why should we believe you? How can we believe you today?
Well, Mr. Chair, through you, I would like to inform Mr. Barrett that he's simply mistaken and putting false claims on. We've litigated this at Ethics now twice, and the Ethics Commissioner himself has indicated that on the 6th, 7th, and 8th of September, I was not involved in the text messages that the National Post and that the Conservatives keep trying to raise. I'm simply not the person involved in those conversations. There was a text exchange between me and Mr. Anderson regarding a Pure Later account that needed to be settled, and I was very clear about that at Ethics. There was no communication between us in the following days. Mr.
Seems to change. Your story always seems to change once you no, sir, it's my time.
And
your story always seems
to.
Then
I was there on the 8th as well.
Okay, one person at a time, please. It's very difficult for the interpreters to figure out what's going on here. One person at a time, please. I believe Michael Barrett had a question, and then we'll have an answer. Mr. Barrett. Point of order from Mr. Frederick.
This has been happening regularly in this particular exchange, and I think that it's good at the outset just to clear it up. Let's give the witness enough time to offer a response back.
Mr. Barrett, you have the floor.
Equal time. You said you were a journalist. Are you?
Mr. Barrett, I was a regular reporter for the Francophone news outlet, CBC Radio Canada.
Yep,
I was a member of the Canadian Media.
And that was equal time, and that's not what CBC has said. You said you were Indigenous. to get federal contracts disenfranchising Indigenous peoples. Are you?
Mr. Chair, that is simply false. That's not true. I've never claimed Indigenous status, and I've never applied for an Indigenous contract. Full stop.
Well, we know that that's also not true because the company that you own 50% of, Mr. Boissonnault, did exactly that. Your company, GHI, is under investigation for fraud and being investigated by the police. Is that correct?
I've not been contacted by any police service to that effect. And Mr. Barrett, I was not involved in any federal contracts while I was operating.
And so
a
as much
company.
as you want to distance yourself from it, this is very much yours to own because you in fact owned 50% of it. So you were willing to cash the checks, but you're not willing to take any of the responsibility for where the money came from and how it came to be in possession of the company. Suspicious warehouse fires, fraud
Point of order, Mr.
investigations.
Chair.
Mr. Carr?
Yeah, I'm wondering, for the benefit of myself and other committee members, I would very much appreciate if the clerk could provide the timing of the length of questioning that you are allocating. It's 6 minutes per member. Every time that you stop the clock to deal with a point of order or to address something Mr. Barrett or Mr. Zimmer or others have said, I'd like it to be tracked for the committee that you're not providing more time to Mr. Barrett. So for our benefit, please, if you could have the clerk.
Are you questioning the judgment of the chair?
I am asking for the chair through his
Are
clerk.
you questioning the integrity of the chair?
I am
Mr.
asking the chair through
I
the
have
clerk.
the timer right here, Mr. Chair, and I am keeping as close eye as I
So,
possibly
Mr.
can.
Clerk, I'm going to ask through you then, please,
Well,
sir.
no, Chair, that's not how this works, Mr.
Oh,
Carr,
okay.
you
Well,
know.
then, Mr. Chair, I'm asking,
We
and I
trust
don't
your
believe,
chairs at committee when it comes
Mr. Chair.
to that time.
Mr. Chair,
I've
I'm
answered
asking
your-
on a point of order.
I've answered your point of order.
Point of order, Chair.
I'm
This is
watching that,
clearly
Mr.
disruptive,
Yes.
intended to be disruptive.
Sorry, I
Let's get
wasn't
back
done
to
my-
work.
I
Let's
wasn't
get
done
back
my
to the
point
work
of
of this
I've
committee.
already ruled on that. Thank
Point
you.
of order.
Mr. Barrett, you have 45 seconds. The floor is yours.
So, Mr. Boissonnault, while you were claiming to be Indigenous, the Liberal Party was also echoing that claim on their websites and posting that you were Indigenous, and the ethical problems that presents, of course, are self-evident. But I'd like to know from you, if you're aware, how much money the Liberal Party of Canada fundraised off of your false claim and their false claim that you were Indigenous when that was simply false.
So, Mr. Barrett, I sat at Indigenous Caucus as an ally between 2015 and 2019. And during the 2019 election, the party mistakenly included me on a list of Indigenous candidates. When I realized that I was on that list, I called the party, we contacted the party, and we had that mistake corrected. And I have never received, as a candidate in 2015, 2019, or 2021, any funding from the fund to support Indigenous candidates. And that is appropriate as it should be because I do not claim Indigenous status.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Boissonnault.
How are you repairing the pain and suffering you have caused to Canada's Indigenous people?
I've apologized, and I hope that allows us to build from here. And I really appreciate your sensitivity and how difficult this is for the people that you represent, Ms. Idlow. So I take that very seriously. And if I could, I would say thank you in your language, if that were appropriate, but I'd seek out your consent to do that first. So I will just say thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Boissonnault. We continue on this second round of questioning, but now we go back to 5 minutes. Now to the Conservatives, Mr. Cooper.
Mr. Boissonnault, through you, Mr. Chair, have you commenced legal action against Mr. Anderson?
I've sought legal advice, Mr. Cooper, to look
So
at
the
all of
answer
my
to that
legal
is
options
no.
against
So
him.
let me get this straight. You claim that you are not the Randy in Anderson's text messages. The first report of his Randy being implicated in the $500,000 shakedown of the Gowie Group was all the way back 6 months ago on June 4th of this year. On July 17th, Anderson testified at the Ethics Committee that the only Randy at Global Health Imports was you. That day, you issued a statement in which you said you were, quote, deeply troubled by Anderson's testimony and suggested that he was using your name without your consent. That was 5 months ago. If you truly had no involvement in this shakedown of the operations of Global Health Imports, and Anderson was using your name, unbeknownst to you, you would have sued Mr. Anderson 5 months ago, I would put it to you. You still wouldn't, you've done nothing, is what you've said.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Cooper,
Mr. Drouin?
Just, I'm seeking your advice as to, is Mr. Cooper offering legal advice to Mr. Boissonnault, or is he just pontificating on something? Is he a lawyer?
I am a lawyer.
Thank you. I don't think that was a point of order. I think that was a question. I appreciate it. Mr. Boissonnault, the floor is yours.
well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, to Mr. Cooper's question, I have started the process to take legal action against Mr. Anderson now, and I'll be very clear. One of the reasons I stepped away from cabinet was to be able
Besides
to
retaining
Mr.
counsel,
Chair, do
besides
I get my
retaining
time?
counsel, it's my time,
Hold
I'm
on.
reclaiming
Chair?
my time. Besides retaining counsel, have you taken any legal steps whatsoever against Mr. Anderson in the past 5 or 6 months?
Mr. Chair, how many seconds do I have from Mr. Cooper's opening statement?
It's a very simple question. Just answer it.
Okay, hang on. Okay, as I said from the beginning, the time of the answer should be as close as possible to the length of the question. And so I've been giving a bit of leeway here, but I want to keep it as close as possible. So,
It's
So,
a yes
Mr.
or no.
Schmale, to
We'll
Mr.
give you-
Cooper's first, I haven't been able to answer his first question because he interrupted me 3 times.
Okay, why
So
don't
can I
we-
answer his first question?
well, he took the floor
I'm ready
back.
to
so
answer his first
I guess the time is yours. However,
This is,
usually you just answer the question you just gave you.
So I'll answer the question. In the recent court case against Mr. Anderson, it is clear that Mr. Anderson has been using my name without consent. I'm not involved in
and my
those
question to
other
you was whether
conversations.
you had commenced a legal action and you have, through your non-answer, said that you
We are
haven't.
working
And so,
on- we
so
are working
Mr.
on the legal
Boissonnault,
action
it's
right
my
now,
reclaiming my
Mr.
time,
Point of order,
Mr.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, point
Just
of order.
again,
I don't know who was first, Mr. Drouin or Mr.
Running
Carr.
interference.
no, Mr. Cooper, it's you're running interference. I thought the rule was if there's editorializing on a particular issue, then the witness has the same amount of time to answer the question,
No,
but
yeah,
that's not.
There's the preamble and there's the question.
On the same point of order.
Hang on, I got
Well,
Mr.
hold on a
Carr up
second, I'm
next.
not
Okay.
done, I'm not done,
The-
but for the respect of interpreters, Mr. Cooper keeps interrupting the witness, and I get that he doesn't want to ask questions, he just wants to editorialize on certain issues and make false claims
You don't
here.
have to give him the
But at the
time
end of
to
the day, Mr.
pontificate.
Boissonnault has offered his time to be here, which is unprecedented, because I'd love to have Andrew Scheer here about his fake
Okay,
insurance
okay,
claim.
Okay, I think.
On the
I
same
think we
point
got
of
that.
order, Chair.
But
I
just
think we're
let's
good.
be
Let's go
respectful.
to Mr. Carr, then Mr. Genuis, okay? Mr. Carr?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I think Mr. Drouin covered it. I just, for the sake of our interpreters, particularly given that we've got 3 different languages being interpreted here today, I think it's for the benefit of committee that all members involved in discussion are mindful of that. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Mr. Genuis?
Yeah, just briefly on the point of order. The rules are not equal time between the questioner and the witnesses.
That is correct.
The rules,
Just
the rules
given the
are
circumstances.
that the member controls the time. So that needs to be understood. And secondly, let's be clear that Mr. Boissonnault is not here because he chose to come. He is here because there is a House order requiring him to be here for 2 hours. There's an unprecedented move, House order requiring him to be here. He has to be here for 2 hours, answering 2 hours worth of questions, and these Liberal disruptions are just extending the amount of time that we're going to be here.
Yeah. Is he
Now, the reason I said that, yes, you are correct, Mr. Genuis, that is the rule. The reason I allowed a bit of latitude in terms of the length of time was because, in fact, we do have 3 interpretations going on at the same time. However, I do understand that witnesses do try to stretch things out. So the members do have the ability to take the floor back. So let's go back to Mr. Cooper. I even forget what question you asked, to be honest with you.
Well, Mr. Chair, I put it to Mr. Boissonnault if he had commenced legal action. He did not answer in the affirmative. I then asked Mr. Boissonnault if he had taken any legal steps whatsoever against Mr. Anderson. He changed the subject and didn't answer in the affirmative, and I would put it to him that the reason Mr. Boissonnault hasn't pursued legal action after 5 or 6 months is because the brass tacks of a court proceeding would expose him as the other Randy who violated the Conflict of Interest Act and who had an active involvement in a shady pandemic profiteering PPE company implicated in fraud. Now, Mr. Boissonnault, your credibility as a witness is very much in doubt. You came before the Ethics Committee on June the 4th, and you left the committee with the distinct impression that you had not been in contact with Stephen Anderson, when that wasn't the case. Mr. MP Brock put it to you, did you call Mr. Anderson? You said, no. Why would I call Mr. Anderson? I would not. No. You said that, and then after new text messages were revealed connecting Randy in Vancouver while you were in Vancouver, suddenly you changed your story and said that you had actually spoken with Anderson and had a text message exchange with Anderson. If you have nothing to hide, why did you materially leave out that relevant fact if you're not the Randy involved in the shakedown?
So, Mr. Cooper, let's go back to your earlier question. I stepped away from cabinet to deal with these issues, and I have met with lawyers, and we are working on legal action against Mr. Anderson right now. So let's put that on the record. The ethics commissioner, not once but twice,
I
has
asked
indicated
you,
that I'm
Mr.
not the person
Boissonnault, why
that
it is you
referred to
materially
in-
Point of order,
omitted
Mr.
that
Chair.
fact. And I would put it to you, I'm
Point of
going to
order,
ask you
Mr.
another
Chair.
question, but as
Mr.
Mr.
Chair,
Carr
point
runs
of order.
interference to protect you because you're a liar.
Mr. Chair,
The floor is Mr. Carr's.
there are 3 things here. The first is Mr. Cooper a moment ago referred to Mr. Boissonnault as a fraud. I'm not sure that that's within the scope of standing order provisions. Number 2, he just repeated the word liar, which you've already ruled on today, Mr. Chair.
You got a minute.
And the third thing, Mr. Chair, is that you made a ruling earlier this meeting that it's equal time for questions
Correct,
and
but I-
answers, regardless of if to Mr. Genuis's point, which is fair, regardless of whether or not the standing order provides a provision for that or not, you ruled on that, Mr. Chair. So we would have to come back to that commentary that you made earlier in the meeting. Nonetheless, I would hope, Mr. Chair, that you will advise Mr. Cooper to be mindful of language he's using that you have already ruled to be out of the scope of order here. And quite frankly, you're really not well placed for parliamentarians. Thank you.
Well,
Okay, Mr. Drouin?
Mr. Cooper should withdraw his comment. It is unparliamentary language towards another member of parliament. Withdraw. Otherwise, I'm going to keep point ordering this. Withdraw the comment. Unacceptable.
I'll ask
Cooper, do
another
you care to
question. Then
respond?
Mr. Drouin
Are you
can,
responding to the point of order, or are you continuing
I'm
your line of
continuing with
questioning?
my line of questioning.
Okay.
Point of order.
Point of order.
Okay, Mr. Drouin
Withdraw
again?
the comment. He should not be allowed to ask questions. This
Mr.
is the
Cooper?
pure rules.
Okay.
Withdraw.
Do you wish to
Withdraw.
withdraw? Your microphone's off.
I continue with my line of questioning.
Point of
Mr.
order, Chair.
Boissonnault,
Okay.
Point of order on the same point of order that's been
Mr.
raised.
Practice-Gatos.
It's a very simple thing. All he has to do is withdraw the comment. He knows very well. He's an experienced
Well-
parliamentarian. That is not parliamentary language.
I will withdraw the word lie and restate that he misrepresented to committee that he hadn't spoken with Mr. Anderson
Point of order,
when he
Chair.
did.
Point of order, Chair.
That is
Okay, he
that is a
withdrew.
fact.
He
He
withdrew.
did not exactly withdraw. The word that was used is liar. He should withdraw that
I
word.
did.
He withdrew, and he substituted with, what it was
I said that
untruths?
he misrepresented to
Misrepresented.
committee that he hadn't spoken with Mr. Anderson at a material time when in fact he did. And
Okay.
Mr.
So you're going back to your question? Okay, you
if I-
have 1
if I-
minute left.
Unless
point
the
of
locals
order,
are going to
Mr.
continue to
Chair.
disrupt and run interference
I think
for
we're
him.
good. You have 1 minute.
Mr. Chair, point of order.
There they go again.
Okay, Mr. Henley.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. What I heard withdrawn was the word lie, but what I heard Mr. Cooper state was liar. I think the word that needs to be withdrawn is liar.
I
Thank
think
you,
we
Mr. Chair.
all, at least I knew what he meant. I knew what he meant. Okay, Mr. Cooper. Mr. Cooper.
Mr. Boissonnault,
Mr. Trusno, we have a
Mr.
minute.
Boissonnault, you're continuing to mislead committee. You did so today, yet again. You said in your opening statement that all of the cloud of scandal and corruption reported in the media occurred after you had been elected in October of 2021. But you know that that isn't true because you were a partner at Global Health Imports in June of 2020, correct?
I was.
And you were not elected in June of 2020.
Correct.
And that is the very time that Global Health Imports submitted an application or a bid on a federal contract purporting to be wholly Indigenous owned. So why did you say that all of the allegations occurred after you had left Global Health Imports or as a partner because you were elected when in fact you knew that that wasn't true? One of the very material issues before this committee, the fact that you have falsely represented yourself or your company has falsely represented it as being Indigenous, occurred while you were not only a 50% owner, but one of the two partners of the company. Why did you mislead committee this morning on that?
Mr. Cooper, nothing could be further from the truth. And as I've stated very clearly, I was not involved in any federal work whatsoever in any of my businesses. And I confirmed that with the ethics commissioner. And so Mr. Anderson
Those were your words
solely
before
Point of order,
why did you mislead
Chair.
committee?
Mr. Chair, point of
Why
order.
did you mislead committee?
Point of order,
Your
Mr.
time
Chair.
is up. Mr. Genuis.
Mr. Boissonnault, you said today that you came to the term non-status adopted CREE through consultation with an Indigenous researcher. What was the name of that researcher?
I met with Chad Cowie, who was a student.
Thank you very much. We know. Thank you. We know who Mr. Cowie is, Professor Cowie is. In an interview with the National Post, Professor Cowie denied your version of events. The National Post quotes him as saying, "I would not say that I gave him the term that he was non-status adopted CREE." Did Professor Cowie tell the truth to the National Post, and do you now want to correct your opening statement?
My opening statement was very clear, Mr. Genuis. I said that I chose the term non-status adopted CREE after having a conversation with Mr. Cowie. That conversation was almost 3 years ago.
So now it's clear that it was. So you sat down with Professor Cowie, and he gave you some advice. You ignored that advice and came up with this term independently on your own, and then you came back to committee and said, well, in the context of conversation, I came up with this term. I mean, frankly, that's what we've come to expect from you, Mr. Boissonnault, but I think it's now further revelation of what we have come to expect. My next question is, the Liberal Party's Indigenous Peoples Commission put up an Instagram post on June 30th, 2016, which falsely claimed that you were Indigenous. Now, that post is still up. Wow. You said the error was corrected. Why were social media posts falsely calling you Indigenous left up right even till the present day?
I don't have an answer for why that's still on that party website, Mr. Genuis. I can tell you when I was on a list of Indigenous candidates in the 2019 election, I acted very quickly and removed that.
Okay. So let's just get some clarity on what you meant when you said that the error was corrected. So there is an error in a June 30th, 2016 Instagram post. That error was not corrected. The post remains up today in December of 2024. What exactly did you mean when you said the error was corrected?
Mr. Genuis, I wasn't aware of that 2016 Instagram post. I was referring to the list of Indigenous candidates in 2019 that I was falsely on and made that correct. And the error
Okay. So you corrected a list in 2019, apparently, but you and your team are not closely monitoring the social media activity of the party that you're a part of. Was the false claim that the Liberals elected 9 Indigenous MPs in 2015, was that false claim ever used in Liberal Party fundraising?
I don't have that information in front of me, and I would not be on that list of candidates.
Okay, so maybe we need to follow up and see how much money the Liberal Party raised off the false claim that there were 9 Indigenous MPs elected in their caucus in 2015. Mr. Boissonnault, you have said repeatedly that you've never claimed Indigenous status. And it should be obvious to everyone that that is an intentional formulation when you say you've never claimed Indigenous status, because that is not the same thing as saying you've never claimed to be Indigenous. A person might claim to be Indigenous without claiming Indigenous status. So let's get around the lawyerly formulation here and ask you the core question. Have you ever claimed to be Indigenous?
Mr. Genuis, I'm not Indigenous, and I've never claimed to be Indigenous or to have Indigenous status. This is a distinction. I'm not sure where you're going with this, but I'm not Indigenous. I don't have Indigenous status, and I've never claimed either.
You've never claimed to be Indigenous. So on April the 12th, 2016, when you said in the House of Commons that as a Canadian and as an adopted CREE, you weren't claiming to be Indigenous. When the Liberal Party of Canada posted that you were Indigenous and it was not corrected, you still had never claimed to be Indigenous. When your partner claimed that your company was Indigenous owned, you had still never claimed to be Indigenous. There are all these people around you that have publicly claimed that you are Indigenous. You have said in the House of Commons that you're Indigenous, and now you're before this committee saying that you never did. How can anyone believe anything you say, Mr. Boissonnault?
Mr. Genuis, I've never claimed to be Indigenous. What I said in the
on the record.
House was that that is not. You're misinterpreting the record.
Okay,
That is not
we'll let
what I
Mr.
said.
Boissonnault answer the question, and then that's
I've
How
misinterpreted
many
that
seconds do I
round.
have, Mr. Chair?
You can answer the question, and that'll be the end of this round.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Chair, I have never indicated to the Liberal Party of Canada that I'm Indigenous, full stop. And I tried to come up with a term that I now understand was not clear. For the record, I'm not Indigenous. I don't have Indigenous status, and I would not claim either.
We go to Mr. Barrett for 5 minutes. Sorry, I apologize.
Mr. Boissonnault, on November 15th, your disclosure with the Ethics Commissioner's Office was updated to reflect a loan receivable from an individual. Is that related to any business venture, including Ms. Poon, Mr. Anderson, GHI, or Xenex, or to your collapsing or surrendering your shares in GHI?
No,
Who's the individual?
that is a matter that is with the Ethics Commissioner, and that's where it should stay.
Well, I'll note for you, sir, that it's not your prerogative to not answer questions. You cannot refuse to answer a question before a parliamentary committee. Are you refusing to tell us the name of the individual, yes or no?
Mr. Chair, can we have clarification on that? This information is with the Ethics Commissioner, and that's where it should reside.
Stop time, Chair.
Yep, sorry, stop.
Point of order on that too?
Okay.
If the member wants to bring ethics commissioner questions or ethics question, he's a member of the ethics commissioner's ethics committee. He can bring that over there. This is not related to what we're discussing today. And I agree.
No,
It
yeah,
is
that
between, it's a
I
matter
agree, that
between
is-
the ethics commissioner and individuals.
that
He
is
doesn't
debate.
share his private information with everyone. It is with the ethics commissioner, and she should have the respect to have the respect with other
Okay,
members of parliament.
okay. Thank you, Mr. Duran. Thank you, Mr.
Yes.
Duran.
You know that.
Okay, okay,
Go that low.
okay. Mr. Barrett, the floor is yours.
You go that low.
I'll give the rest of my time to Mr. Shields.
Okay. Mr. Shields.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Boissonnault, for being here. You made the comment that you've made amends for the mistakes that you have made. The Liberal Party publications have been out there and referred to a number of times today. Has the Liberal Party apologized for the mistakes they made that you asked them to correct?
Thank you, Mr. Shields. And well, I think I would say that I'm in the process of making amends. I think it's a longer process. I've apologized. And I think that was the right place to start. And the Liberal Party corrected the error in 2019. And I'm not responsible for posts that I didn't design or post. And I'm not aware if they made an apology, but they certainly corrected the 2019 error.
Made an apology, and you said they made the error. They've corrected it, but not apologized. That's my understanding, your answer?
That's my understanding as well.
Okay, a prime minister committed, I better read a quote to you, a prime minister committed to true reconciliation would have removed Randy from cabinet long ago. Instead, we get to watch white people play Ancestry, Wheel of Fortune. So shameful and extremely destructive. Are you familiar with that quote?
I am not.
Comes from your colleague, your former colleague, Jody Wilson-Raybould. Former colleague.
Acquaintance.
Do you believe in that, what she has stated in that quote?
Mr. Shields, I have no response to that. I'm focused on clearing my name and helping everybody understand that I'm not Indigenous and I've never claimed to be Indigenous, and I don't claim Indigenous status, and I never have.
So she's very disappointed in what has occurred as the first Indigenous cabinet minister in the role that she played as Indigenous minister, and she's very disappointed. So what has that reflected on the Indigenous people in our country as we had a leading cabinet minister, first Indigenous in that role that she played? She has a significant voice in this country, and she's very disappointed. What's your opinion of why Indigenous people should not be disappointed in this situation?
Mr. Shields, with all due respect, I have no comment on that. I'm focused on myself and my commitment to reconciliation.
When we talk about reputations that you are looking at rebuilding, as you said, and rebuilding with Indigenous, in public life, no matter what level you are, whether you're a sports person, whether you're in politics, a simple mistake basically is irreparable. How do you believe you can rebuild this reputation with Indigenous people in this country?
I think the conversations will be really important, and I have started that work with elders, with community leaders, with individuals who have reached out to me. And Mr. Shields, those conversations, I will keep doing those conversations. I'll keep having those conversations, and I will do the work of reconciliation, of being an ally and a champion to Indigenous peoples. And that is how I will continue to serve as a member of Parliament for Edmonton Centre, because it's my duty and it's my firm commitment to Indigenous peoples.
As you mentioned, representing your constituents in your constituency, this is major. This is not a minor where the first baseman of the New York Mets missed a ball coming down the line. This is a major personality challenge. How can you continue to represent all of those constituents in your riding with these major disasters?
Mr. Shields, I think it's by being honest with people and being straightforward, and it's in part why I am happy to answer your questions and the questions of all members here today. I think it's a part of doing the work, and that's what I will do.
So, time's up.
Thank you. We'll go to Mr. Genuis.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Boissonnault, you granted a personal loan and you wouldn't answer Mr. Barrett's questions about who it was to. I do understand the sensitivities around this, but the committee does have a hard time believing you and obviously has many questions about your business dealings. So I want to ask, would you be willing to provide that name in writing to the committee with the understanding that it would not be made public unless the committee saw it as being in the public interest to be made public? Would you be willing to provide the name on that basis?
Mr. Genuis, I will share this with the committee. It is to a loan for a friend for a property, and it's not appropriate to share that person's name with the committee or with Canadians.
Okay, my request was that it would be provided on a private basis to the committee for the committee to consider, and it sounds like you're not willing to do that. So we'll move on to the next question. You continued to own GHI after you were elected. When did you step back from GHI operations?
Once I was elected in September of 2021, I sent an email to my lawyer, who contacted Mr. Anderson's lawyer to let them know that I was stepping away from the company.
Okay. GHI claimed to be a wholly Indigenous-owned company in a bid made in June 2020. So you had not stepped aside at that point. You were involved in the operation of the company when it claimed to be fully Indigenous-owned. Were you aware of the bid made for masks from the federal government in June of 2020?
No, Mr. Anderson was uniquely and totally responsible for federal contracts. It would have been inappropriate for me to work on any federal contracts. I confirmed that with the Ethics Commissioner, and it was the same approach that I used.
Mr. Boissonnault, we're talking about a time, let's underline the date, June of 2020. We're talking about a time when you were not elected. You have said, and this is obviously disputed, but you have said you stepped back from any involvement in the company after you were elected, but we're talking about a time when you were not elected, and therefore when the company was still claiming to be wholly Indigenous owned. So in June of 2020, were you aware of bids, a bid for masks, to provide masks to the federal government?
Mr. Genuis, I've been very clear that I worked with the Ethics Commissioner, and I was very clear with Mr. Anderson that any federal contracts were entirely his responsibility.
And you're saying that that included the time when you were not elected?
Absolutely. There was a wall in our company so that I would not have anything to do with federal contracts. It would be inappropriate. I was still governed by lobbying provisions. I took my
And at no point in that bid did he ever even ask you if you were Indigenous? Just answer the question. Did he at any point ask you if you were Indigenous? How did he come to the conclusion that you were Indigenous?
He did not, and none of our company was certified Indigenous, so he should not have done this at all. And I'm glad that the provisions, the safeguards, prevented the company from getting.
So I guess we're to believe that Mr. Anderson sat down with the Liberal Party of Canada, and they both decided to falsely claim you were Indigenous without ever consulting you. Mr. Boissonnault, you've said that your CREE name means strong eagle man. Now, I've consulted with Indigenous leaders on this. I understand that being gifted a traditional name has a very specific cultural and ceremonial context. I wonder if you could share with the committee what that name is, when you were given it, who gave it to you, and what was the ceremony involved?
Absolutely, that is a gift of the name and an eagle feather by Elder Ed LaValle of the Edmonton Two Spirit Society, and that was done in a medicine blanket ceremony the Friday before the election in 2021, and it was the Elder Ed LaValle presided at that ceremony. My mom attended that ceremony, and I really respect that gift. And the Cree name is Maskau Kihiyu, and it translates into strong eagle man. And the reason that the Two Spirits Society conferred this great honor on me is because they said I gave voice to the voiceless, and that the reason they chose strong eagle man was because I would be flying back and forth to Ottawa after the election, and it was my responsibility to take care of it.
Okay, well, we'll be able to verify that, and I do thank you for providing that context. Finally, you said that you participated in the Liberal Indigenous Caucus as an ally. Were there ever any other non-Indigenous people who were counted as members of the Liberal Indigenous Caucus? Because all of the public representations of the Liberal Indigenous Caucus exclusively show members of Parliament who are or have claimed to be Indigenous. So why is it that there were no other people invited into the caucus on the same basis that you were?
I'm not sure that other allies made the same representation that I did, but when we met as a caucus between 2015 and 2019.
But can you just confirm then that that's a no, that you were the only one?
No, Mr. Genuis, we frequently opened the meeting up to other allies.
No, but you were a member, right?
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Point of order.
Okay, time has expired. Time has just expired. Do you still have a point of order?
Well, yeah, with all due respect to Mr. Genuis, if he wants to join our Liberal Caucus, he can join, and we'll explain to him how we work inside our caucus, but our caucus is none of his business.
Okay, all right, thank you, Mr. Drew. That's not a point of order.
But just on the point of order, there are public posts about this Liberal Indigenous Caucus which show its members. So it's convenient for it now to be a private caucus matter.
Debate.
Time is up.